incorporates New Orville, obviously, Dixwell, downtown, including Yale, and a small portion of East Rock. So it's a pretty diverse district. It's going to change, but that's what it's currently constituted as.
Okay, this past year, you've been up there in Hartford. What do you think was probably the one legislation that you guys might have passed that's going to make a difference?
Well, that's a very good question. I actually think there's several pieces, but I think the education legislation that we passed probably has the most significant impact if we're doing it right. And I think we're finally getting along the right direction. And as I think you know, the governor is looking at doing some education legislation coming up. But in the recent sessions, we've done things like school governance councils, making it more difficult for kids to drop out of school. Some of us are looking at some reports, one out of Texas from the Council of State Governments, and one that was just released here in Connecticut about 2-3 weeks ago about the disproportionate way in which minorities are affected by punitive measures within the schools and how we can do something about that. Because as many of us know, education is not a panacea, but it is one of the ways that you can move yourself out of poverty and onto a more successful life. So I think the education policy is the most important stuff we're doing.
Great. Now, right here in the city, of course, we've got the magnet schools, we've got the charter schools, and there's sort of a lot of experiments going on in the city.
Sure.
How is that, affecting, how you, take that information from here and go up to Hartford?
Well, to be honest with you, I see myself as a representative of New Haven, but I'm also a member of the General Assembly. So I look at education policy both from the city of New Haven and from the state perspective. What I've done is engage some experts who worked on education for a number of years, including Margie Gillis, who's from Haskins Lab, George Sadai, who's a national expert. He's worked for the Obama administration. I brought in the executive director of the Commission on Children and several legislators. We sat around the table for some of those people for over a year, and some of those people for the last few months, looking at some best practices, looking at ways of changing what we do in education, and not simply talking about the relationships that adults in education have, but what happens with children in education. So one of the things that comes out of this is a piece of legislation we did in this last session, which was to take the reading assessment tool we have, the DRA/DRA2, and say, well, this is a tool that we've used for the last decade, but it might not be the most effective tool. Is there a more effective tool? Because at the core of this achievement gap, you have a numeracy problem and a literacy problem, but at the core is this reading issue. And if we can't assess the children in such a way that we can figure out what the issue is with the children, then even if the teacher is trained, the teacher's got a scattershot approach at it. So what we said is, we found a tool. The tool tells us not only that the child can't read, but here's why the child can't read, so it makes it easier for the teacher. And it not only that, but with the DRA2, you have to go through this process that takes you a while. With this tool, it uses a piece of technology, and you pretty much spit out the answer. And so we're trying to do things where we're not just talking about the relationships of adults in school, because that's fine. But we need to actually talk about the fundamentals of reading, writing, arithmetic, and all of those things.
And in fact, what we're finding here, at least in this experience in New Haven, is that some of your charter schools and some of your magnet schools are really doing a great job, whereas other schools that are not part of this system, so to speak, are not doing so well.
Sure.
So in terms of what you guys have done, this is something that you can generally put out across the whole state in every community.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. That's great. Now, one of the other issues, of course, is the socioeconomic issues that we're having in the state.
Yes.
And of course, unemployment, the big one. And I know earlier we talked about that.
Yes.
Give us your perspective on how are we going to grow this economy, and what are you guys talking about up in Hartford?
Well, I've been in trouble before, so let me just put it like it is.
Yes.
The state of Connecticut doesn't want to talk about race. We only want to talk about economics. So when we talk about education reform and the issues we have in the gap, there's a racial component that until 2 weeks ago when that report came out, we didn't want to talk about it. When we talk about unemployment, there's a racial component that says there's no report, we don't want to talk about